this recording we will discuss the large intestine. Your large intestine runs along the borders of your abdominal pelvic cavity, the abdominal part of the abdominal pelvic cavity. It does surround the small intestine and your other abdominal organs kind of in a frame-like manner. Your large intestine is only about 5 foot long. So where do we get the name from? We mentioned this when we talked about the small intestine. It's due to the larger diameter compared to the small intestine. Your large intestine is going to receive materials from your small intestine that were not completely digested or absorbed, and it is a passageway for feces to exit the body. Not necessarily something we go into detail about on a regular basis, but kind of important. We do find 3 unique features of the large intestine. We've got Taenia coli, Hostra, and epiploic appendages. Now, what are these things? What are we talking about? So, histologically speaking, the muscularis externa of your large intestine is kind of special because the longitudinal layer is not continuous throughout most of the length of the large intestine, those 5 feet. Instead, we gather this layer into 3 bands, and we call this the Taenia coli. The constant tension within the bands or the bunches create these little pockets that we call Hostra. Okay. And then the serosa, also known as the visceral peritoneum of the large intestine, contains little fat-filled pouches. These are the epiploic appendages. Okay, it gives us a little bit of extra cushion there. Now, as materials move from the ileum of the small intestine, we move through the ileocecal valve, we dump right off into the cecum. Okay, it is a blind pouch. Right, we got blind in on one side. We're going to go up the ascending large intestine on the other side of the cecum. We also find a smaller blinded ended pouch. So we got all kinds of blind pouches going on here. Look, y'all, this is your appendix. This is all you get. It looks like a little worm, a little finger. Okay. Sometimes you might hear it called your vermiform appendix. Most people just call it your little old appendix. Now, once upon a time, your appendix was a little bit more useful than it is now, but it does still have somewhat of a function as it contains multiple lymphatic nodules, so it does play a role in your immune system. Next, we take the materials from the cecum, we move up the ascending colon. We'll take a turn at the hepatic flexure. We'll move through the transverse colon, where we'll have to take another turn at the splenic flexure so we can move down the descending colon. We'll have to move kind of around the S-shaped sigmoid colon as we pass the last little bit of materials through the rectum, and it will leave out of the anus. Okay, so lots of words, lots of directional terms, but here we go. Let's show a picture. We're going to dump materials into the cecum. We're going to go up the ascending colon. We're going to take a turn at the hepatic flexure so we can go through the transverse colon. We take another turn at the splenic flexure and go down the descending colon. We go around the sigmoid colon where we attach to the rectum, and feces will move out of the anus. There you go. That is the pathway. Now, let's talk about what happens at the end of the path. So after you hit the sigmoid colon, the next place would be the rectum. Okay, and this is the last portion of the large intestine. The walls of the rectum. We got some features here. We've got horizontal folds. We call these rectal valves, which allow gas, or flatus, to escape without simultaneously passing feces. So you are able to expel gas without always passing feces. I don't think I have to emphasize how important that is. The rectum will end with the anal canal. Okay, we have 2 sphincters. We have an internal and external anal sphincter here. The internal anal sphincter is composed of the circular layer of the muscularis externa. This is parasympathetically controlled, so this is an involuntary sphincter. However, the external anal sphincter is actually skeletal muscle, so this is supplied by somatic motor neurons and controlled by your cerebral cortex, so this is voluntary. So at some point you can hold and squeeze and keep it in, but at some point your parasympathetic system will take over and you will go to the bathroom. Okay, hopefully you have made it to the potty. This is kind of what that looks like. Here's that rectal valve we mentioned. This can move, and again, we're allowing flatulence to escape without feces. And then we've got the, let's see, up here we go. This one is the internal anal sphincter, and then we've got the external anal sphincter, involuntarily controlled, voluntarily controlled. All right, food will stay in your large intestine somewhere between 12 and 24 hours. This allows for the last little bit of water and vitamins to be absorbed. However, we are not going to do any more chemical digestion. There are no more enzymes that get added into the large intestine. We do find a good bit of mucus being secreted here to help lubricate the passage of feces. You're also going to have bacteria that live within the large intestine. This is where the gases come from. As they metabolize some of the remaining nutrients that have moved into the large intestine, they are helping us to create vitamin B12 and vitamin K, which is kind of important. Those are both really important to bodily processes. But as they create those things for us, some of the byproducts are gas. We get about 500 milliliters of gas per day. That is an average, okay? It is not my business as to whether you make more or less of that, but I'm just informing you where it comes from. Now, the production of feces. What could possibly be left for us to create feces from? It's going to be a little bit of water, okay? Some of that mucus that we just talked about, some of those bacteria that we just talked about. You will have undigested food particles, for example, cellulose, which you find in plant fibers. Our bodies are just not designed to break down cellulose, so it just continues to move through our body until it exits via feces. The bile pigments and bile salts that we added into the small intestine to help with absorption, those get transported out in feces. And last but not least, epithelial cells from the lining of the digestive tract as well. All of that will be expelled through the defecation defecation process from the anus via the good old defecation reflex. Now, motility. We have two types of motility associated with your large intestine. We've got segmentation and we've got mass movements, also known as mass peristalsis. Now, we've mentioned segmentation before when we talked about the small intestine, so this one's familiar to us. The circular muscles of each haustra contracts repeatedly to kind of swirl the material around in each haustrum. We're going to do this for about 1 minute at a time, okay? About every 30 minutes, okay? So every 30 minutes, we're going to churn for about a minute, and then we'll kind of wait. And 30 minutes later, we'll churn for a minute, and then we'll wait. This aids in water and electrolyte absorption, which is primarily controlled by your enteric nervous system, and this is triggered by stretch. So as you move materials through the large intestine, you activate further stretch receptors, and that kind of helps us say, okay, we need to do our 1 minute of churning because we've made it into the next haustrum. We also do mass movements or mass peristalsis, okay? During this process, you have multiple haustra undergoing peristalsis at the same time to propel the contents towards the end of the large intestine. And so, in your mind, let me see if I can find a picture. Let's see. Where's our picture? Haha. Okay. So, just for example, okay, if we had food, well, not food, materials. Okay, if we had food and materials left in this corner, ultimately we have to get them to this corner, so we can go down into the descending colon. So to move our materials through the transverse colon, we have mass, peristalsis. Each of these hostra would contract, and it would propel that material boop, to the end. And then we would do the same thing to push it down into the descending colon. We do the same thing to get it through the sigmoid colon. So hopefully that kind of gives you a visual of what's happening here. Now, let's see. Okay, this happens about 3 to 4 times a day, and it is thought to be triggered by food consumption. So as you eat more food, your body's like, oh, we should probably get rid of the leftovers from the last time that we ate. This is also controlled by your good old enteric nervous system. The distal end of the large intestine is a lot less motile than the proximal end of the large intestine, which makes sense. By the time we get to the distal end of the large intestine, we're basically ready to defecate, and we know that that only happens every so often. And so there's really no reason for a lot of movement to occur at the distal end of the large intestine on a regular basis. When these mass movements occur at the distal end, this does force fecal matter into the rectum, which is normally empty. This process begins the defecation reflex because you activate stretch receptors. Okay, so your rectum realizes, oh, there's feces here. We should do something about that. So your parasympathetic neurons cause the smooth muscles to contract in the sigmoid colon and the rectum. Everybody's going to contract. The internal and anal sphincter will relax. Your cerebral cortex is like, oh, okay, it's time to go to the bathroom. It will also relax your good old external anal sphincter as well. Everybody will contract, including your defecation muscles, and you will go to the bathroom. Let's see here. All right, so we've got your enteric nervous system, parasympathetic. We're like, okay, rectum's full, it's time to go to the bathroom. Your cerebral cortex is like, oh yeah, let's go to the bathroom, so we can activate both your internal and external anal sphincters. And then you do also have defecation muscles, for example, your levator ani muscles. Okay, everybody works together to expel feces from your body. Things can go wrong. Okay, it's a major theme for us. Things can go wrong. Diarrhea can be caused by lots of different things, but it all results in the same symptoms. Any condition that rushes material through the large intestine before water has been sufficiently absorbed. This will result in watery loose stools. A lot of times this is caused by like a bacterial or viral infection, but it could be caused by all kinds of things. But ultimately, if it's bad enough, could lead to dehydration, which is not good. Constipation is kind of the opposite, difficult or inability to defecate at all. This usually results from the lack of water in your stool, and it could also be caused by lack of fiber in your diet. Diverticulitis occurs when you have small hernias in the mucosal layer. This is caused by increased pressure in the colon. Okay. And then irritable bowel syndrome, your abdominal pain that you are experiencing is also accompanied by bloating, gas, nausea, depression, because you have bloating and gas and nausea. Stress is thought to be a common cause of irritable bowel syndrome. Not the only cause, but it's thought to be a common cause. Okay, so another review slide, kind of taking us through the entire alimentary canal, hitting the high points. So make sure you take a look at that.